Good morning. Today, students, we're going to do one more geometry concept that'll carry over into tomorrow. So you've done the Pythagorean theorem and you've found the distance between 2 points. Now we're going to review how to find the volume of three-dimensional figures. This is actually a 6th grade figure here. This is called a rectangular prism. And if you were to count how many little boxes, if each of these boxes is 1 unit on a side, then each one is a cubic unit. And you could count them up. But you can also notice that, there are, I guess we could think of it as layers. There are 3 layers here, which would be the height. So the height of this thing is 3. And then in each layer, there are, 3 by 4, so 12. So there are 12 in each layer. Now I'm going to use a big B to represent that, because that represents the area of the base. And so if I wanted to know the volume of this object, I would figure out how many are in each layer, 12, and I would multiply it by how many layers there are, 3, which is why the volume of an object is the area of the base times the height, and that's the area of the base right here. Right? So in our case, the area of the base is length times width, and then times the height. So remember, length times width times height. So the volume of this thing is 36 cubic units, because you got 3 times 4 times 3, which is 36 cubic units. Okay, so that's all review. But I wanted to talk about that area of the base thing because what we need to do for 8th grade standards is we need to learn how to find the volume of cylinders, cones, and spheres. And it's the same idea, but the area of the base of a cylinder is a little different. You find the area of the base of a cylinder, which is a circle. The area of the base, or uppercase B, is pi times the radius to the 2nd power. Pi r squared is the area of the base. And then that would be one of those stacks, the area of the base, and then the height is just how many stacks are there. So the volume of a cylinder is this. It's pi times the radius squared times the height, because pi times the radius squared is the area of the base. So that's pretty simple. Now, a cone, I drew a cone here that has a radius that's the same as our cylinder, and it has a height that's the same as our cylinder. And in class, I would normally get water and pour them, but what you'd find out is that if they have the same radius and height, it will take 3 of these cones to fill up this cylinder. That means that the volume of this cone is 1/3 the volume of this cylinder. So it's the same idea, only we multiply it by 1/3. It's 1/3 times the area of the base times the height, which is 1/3 times pi r squared times the height. So that would be the volume of a cone. And then finally we have a sphere, and a sphere is a little bit harder. I can just give you the example, but now in this sphere that I drew, the height is exactly 2 radii, okay? It's the same as 2 radii here, and it's gonna match the cone and the cylinder. So it turns out that each half of these spheres is a cone, okay, if the height is the same as the 2 radii. And so that means that there's 2 cones here. So the volume of this sphere is 2/3, because there's 2 of them, times the area of the base times the height. But let's see here, that'd be 2/3 times pi r squared, but then you know what the height is? The height is actually 2 of these r's. So that's times 2r. So now I'm just gonna simplify this a little bit, because I can do 2/3 times 2 is 4/3. And then r to the 2nd times r is r to the 3rd. So that's the volume of a cylinder. It's 4/3 times pi times the radius to the 3rd power. Okay? So I'm just going to do one example now. You can pause and copy this down. This is a hemisphere, which is half of a sphere. And I'm supposed to find the volume. So the only thing that I'm given is the radius is 6 inches. So I'm going to do 4/3 times pi times 6 to the 3rd power, but it's only half of a sphere. So what I'm going to do then is I'm going to take that entire thing and cut it in half. And then I would punch this into my calculator. 6 to the 3rd power is 216. And then I would multiply that by 4/3. So multiply by 4/3, and then multiply that by pi, and then cut the whole thing in half. And what I would get is, I wrote it down, 452 or so. 452 or so cubic inches. So your assignment today is to break up some objects and try to use these 3 formulas to solve those objects. Have a good Wednesday, or Tuesday.